keeping distance using hands-free was similar to those under the influence of alcohol.
I suspect a 9-point, deterrent is probably not that high. I mean, yes, it could mean someone's about to lose their licence if they've already got 3 points, perhaps. But it doesn't sound like a very strong sentence. But the reality is, at the moment, as the law stands, you can only be found guilty of careless driving because it's taking your attention away. I think there should be more legislation around the fact that using a hands-free phone creates an excessive and unnecessary road safety danger. And quite frankly, if that were the case, then the punishment should be higher.
For Tamara, she has to live with her injuries for the rest of her life, but she's hoping her story will bring stricter sentences and encourage drivers to keep their hands off, their hands free. Joe Caution for KMTV.
Next tonight, royalists across Kent have been celebrating the 70th birthday of Prince Charles. Born on the 14th of November 1948, he's been the heir to the throne since 1952, when he was only 3 years old. But would you like to see Prince Charles as the next monarch, or should we skip him as he reaches 70? We asked shoppers in Rochester.
No, I think he should have the crown so that he can let William and his family have more family time before he takes on the responsibility.
I personally haven't got a problem with it. I think he'll be fine as a monarch. As I said earlier, the Queen is still there at 90, so yeah, I haven't got a problem.
Well, I watched his 70th birthday programme and I warmed to him really. And yeah, I think British Constitution says he should inherit the throne when the Queen dies.
I think he should. The Queen has been around for an awful long time. She's going to be around for a little longer yet. And if the trend carries on with her parent, Queen Mother, dying at 101, he still get a fair shot at it, I think.
I would prefer for Prince William to be the next monarch, but I don't think that's going to happen, and I think it's going to be Charles. But that's fair enough, but I don't think Camilla should be his queen and called queen.
I think he should skip through to the next in line to the throne, in a way, because I think we're looking for a new monarch that will reign for hopefully as long as his grandmother would be.
Shoppers in Rochester there, but would you like to see Prince Charles as the next monarch? Let us know using the hashtag KentSays on social media. Coming up, we speak to Gemma Cunningham, who says her 87-year-old nan could have died after being locked on a bus for more than 3 hours.
None of us would have thought to go down to Age UK. It was being closed for the whole weekend. She would have been left on that bus until the Age UK was reopened. She wouldn't have survived. They would all have been up for manslaughter charges.
Welcome back to KentOnline live on KMTV. The family of an 87-year-old from the Isle of Sheppey say she could have died after she was locked on a bus for more than 3 hours. Beryl Harris, who has Alzheimer's, was stuck on an Age UK minibus which was due to drop her home. However, it was instead returned to the centre, where the driver locked up and left for the weekend. Christina Curtis has been speaking to the family.
They were dropping everyone home and they forgot that Nan was on the bus, and they took the bus back to the Age UK.
For more than 3 hours, Beryl was locked in an Age UK bus as her family desperately tried to find her.
I was just shocked, angry. It was horrible. It was only carers coming to sort Nan in the evening, and that she wasn't here. So, like, I've dashed out and I thought she might have been, like, collapsed on the floor dead, and then obviously then to come in and find that she wasn't here, I then, like, panicked, thought she had gone walkabouts. I phoned, like, the people from Age UK, because I had their private numbers, couldn't get hold of the driver, so I phoned the cook, and she said that everyone had been dropped home.
It was then discovered that Beryl had been left on the bus.
When we got down to the club and that, and they were laughing and joking, weren't they, saying that she's probably been asleep, won't remember it anyway. None of us would have thought to go down to Age UK. It was being closed for the whole weekend. She would have been left on that bus until the Age UK was reopened. She wouldn't have survived. They would all have been up for manslaughter charges.
The family say they aren't happy with the apology they received.
If I'd left my children in the car for 4 hours, I'd have social services on my back and have my kids taken away from me. You leave a dog in a car, you have the dog taken away from you and a fine. Nan hasn't got anything. And now they're not even having her at the club. They were picking her up and taking her to the Sheerness one. Someone else was picking her up, but she's not now because they won't fund it. But they don't seem to think it's anything serious.
An Age UK Sheppey spokesman said, "We are truly sorry for this incident and the upset caused, and have apologised to our client and their family. Our number one priority is to ensure the safety of all older people in our care, so we are very disappointed to have fallen short of that. Following the incident, we took immediate steps to investigate how this occurred, as well as implementing our formal disciplinary procedure with the member of staff concerned. We have now put in place new measures and processes to try and ensure this kind of situation could not happen again." Luckily, Beryl was found safe and well, but for her family, the realisation that she was forgotten about by those supposed to care for her has been hard to come to terms with. This is Christina Curtis for KMTV.
Thousands of diabetes sufferers in Kent will now be able to better manage their condition. NHS England has today announced that wearable glucose monitors will be made available to people with type 1 diabetes from April next year. To talk more about this, KMTV's health expert Dr. Julian Spinks joins me now. Julian, how big a moment is this for people who suffer with diabetes?
Well, this is a very important moment. NICE had actually approved these some time ago, and a lot of the country they've been available, but smaller numbers of CCGs had blocked them being prescribed, and unfortunately Medway was one of those. What happens is that instead of having to prick your finger to take a sample to check what your blood sugar is doing, this is a monitor that sits on the arm, monitors it continuously, and then every so often you use a phone app to actually take down readings. And it's being used for people with type 1 diabetes. Those are the ones who need insulin, in particular people who are needing to prick their finger more than 8 times a day, or have unstable diabetes where they may be at risk of collapsing.
And just give us an idea of how much workload, I suppose, how much relief it could be for people who suffer from diabetes.
Well, the problem is the group that are going to be prescribed this are unstable diabetics. They're people who are at risk from either going to very high blood glucose or very low, and in the latter case that can actually cause you to collapse, or for example if you're driving you may actually fall unconscious and crash the car, so that has a major impact. Likewise, poorly controlled diabetics have a poor long-term outlook, and so we try and get diabetic control as good as we possibly can, and this is one way in which people can actually monitor how their diabetes is doing on a more real-time basis without having to prick your finger multiple times a day.
Another interesting study which has come out today, new discovery, could explain why obese people were more likely to develop cancer. What did you make of that?
Yes, very fascinating, and the suggestion is that having all the fat around actually clogs up the cells, which are one of the protective mechanisms against cancer. We also know that actually if you're big, you've got more cells, so there's more of you to actually become cancerous. But the more we understand why cancers happen, the bigger chance we have of actually finding a way to prevent it happening.
And where do we think Kent is at the moment? We've spoken about it before, the obesity problem in the county. Where are we sitting currently?
Well, we have pockets of really quite high levels of obesity. Medway is one, and the more obese we have, the more problems we have with diabetes, with arthritis, heart disease and cancer. And so we really do need to tackle it, and there's a lot of work being done to try and do that.
Julian, as always, thank you very much. Now, with news of another national selection for record-chasing Holcombe Hockey's Barry Middleton, here's Cameron with the sport.
Gillingham boss Steve Lovell says he has plenty to be pleased about after they bowed out of the Checkatrade Trophy with a win last night. Second half goals from Elliot List and Bradley Stevenson were enough for the Gills to defeat Crawley Town 2-1 at Priestfield. Steve Lovell's side were already out of the competition following successive losses to Portsmouth and Tottenham's under-23s. He insisted it was a good game though and gave a run out for returning trio Dean Parrott, Bradley Garmston and Billy Bingham. Dartford have moved into the National League South playoff places courtesy of a 3-2 victory over Oxford City last night. The Darts raced into an early advantage thanks to goals from on-loan Mason duo Andre Coker and Jordan Winter. Oxford halved the deficit, but Charlie Sheringham made it 3-1 to the Kent club, capping a frantic opening 20 minutes. Oxford, off the back of a 3-3 draw with League 2 Tranmere in the FA Cup, hit back in the second half. Zach McEachran scored the game's 5th goal with 17 minutes to play, but the Darts held on to move 7th in the National League South. Holcombe Hockey star Barry Middleton is set to play in his 4th World Cup for Great Britain. The 34-year-old has 425 combined caps for Great Britain and England and could close in on an all-time record of 453, held by the Netherlands' Teun de Nooijer. Fellow Holcombe players David Ames and George Pinner have also been included in the squad. The tournament gets underway in Bhubaneswar on November 28th. I'll be back later on in the programme with more sport from across the county. See you then.
The world needs its storytellers. That's the message from international journalists attending a Medway conference. Hosted by the Worldwide Association of Women Journalists and Writers, the event focuses on storytelling. Speakers of the day included prominent women from across the world of news. Poppy Jeffrey went along.
Journalists from across the world descended on the University of Kent to take part in a conference aimed at promoting diversity in the profession. It's been organised by AMMPE, the Worldwide Association of Women Journalists and Writers.
People have come from absolutely everywhere. This organisation started in 1969 in Mexico, and it grew really rapidly in Chile, Argentina, Taiwan. So people have come here from all over the world to listen to these conversations. And the Congress happens once every 2 years as well. So these group of women are used to seeing each other once every 2 years to meet up and discuss and see how their industry has changed. So today we're having a really interesting discussion about how to increase diversity in the media beyond gender. So most of the conference we focused on the challenges and the opportunities that there are for women journalists, but it's very gender specific. And today we've brought everyone outside of London to talk about class, race. How do we better represent the communities that we serve by getting different people into the industry?
The final day was at the Chatham Dockyard, hosted by the University of Kent.
I think journalism's really important today. It always has been important, but I think more important now than ever. And I think that's all about bringing stories, bringing the truth, bringing things to life that actually are often hidden. And I think really good journalism is about being able to do that in ways that are accessible to people and resonate to people. And I think that's one of the things that this conference is looking at, is how to do that well, but how to do that from very different perspectives. And I think that's really important in telling those stories. You know, gender is part of the whole diversity issue. I think that being a woman in particular professions can be challenging. I think things are changing, and I think it's up to women to be part of that change, and that's why I think these conferences are brilliant. Brings people together, shares ideas, builds networks, builds confidence, and then we can do things differently.
There's definitely more work to be done in making not just journalism, but all professions more diverse. But organisers hope this conference will go some way to helping stories from all backgrounds be heard. This is Poppy Jeffrey for KMTV in Medway.
It's going to be overcast this evening in most parts with lows of 10 degrees in the west of the county. We can expect some sunny spells tomorrow morning though, with temperatures between 12 and 13 into the afternoon, and conditions will stay much the same, although temperatures may drop in Chatham. And looking forward to the next few days, it will stay quite mild and dry for the season. Highs of 14 degrees in Chatham on Friday. Still to come, we'll be back live from number 10 Downing Street with the latest on how proposed Brexit deals could impact to Kent and duck and cover. We speak to the Herne Bay councillor who wants to fine you for feeding the ducks. We'll have the story in a few minutes' time.
I think over a period of time it will work, but we may have to do further education on the way through. I'd hate to think of us fining people for throwing bread in a pond for ducks.
Hello and welcome to KentOnline, live on KMTV. I'm Keelan Webster. Your top stories on Wednesday the 14th of November. The biggest deal in decades. Kent reacts to crunch Brexit cabinet meeting.
We don't really know what the deal is, but it's not likely to be anything that I can support, certainly for Kent.
Make it illegal. Whitstable mum calls for ban on hands-free driving after horror smash.
My son sat behind me, trapped in the car, and he thought I was dead.
Stop ducking the issue. Councillor calls for fines to stop you feeding the ducks.
Well, it's great that people want to feed the ducks in the local park, but bread to a duck is kind of like junk food.
And in sport, Jack's power. Maidstone midfielder talks FA Cup wonder goal.
A reminder of our top story this evening. Kent is waiting with the rest of the world to find out what Brexit deal the government wants to sign up to. The Prime Minister is expected to speak any moment in front of Number 10 after spending hours going through the document with her cabinet. Nearly all of Kent's MPs have stayed tight-lipped on the rumours on what it may contain. It's the biggest moment in Brexit since the referendum result in 2016. Poppy Jeffrey is live in Downing Street for us again this evening. Poppy, a monumental meeting has taken place today. What else can you tell us about it?
Yeah, this really is a key date in the Brexit calendar, and we are nearing the end of what has been a massive day for the UK government. As you can see, I'm in front of the doors of 10 Downing Street, where the Prime Minister Theresa May is expected to come out and speak to the public about what exactly it is that they have all been discussing today. It's so important because this is the first time we've seen any kind of deal, and what this could mean for not just the whole country, but for Kent more close to home. We have tried to contact all of the MPs from across the county today, but they're all staying, as you said, tight-lipped, and no one would speak to us apart from Canterbury MP Rosie Duffield, who we spoke to get her views on what Brexit could hold for the county.
We don't really know what the deal is, but it's not likely to be anything that I can support, certainly for Kent. For Canterbury, certainly, it's potential disaster. We have the knock-on effects of all of the things that happen in Dover, obviously. So even if there's a 2-minute delay on the checks in Dover, they say that that could result in, complete chaos. We know that there's the Operation Brock situation, which they're gearing up for. All of that's going to have a knock-on effect on our small businesses, our tourist trade, transport, all kinds of things. Even the school run could be a complete disaster from now on.
There are two main concerns really for the county of Kent, the Port of Dover, and what could happen to that. Obviously, with people trying to go out of the country and come back in, there could be massive delays. And obviously Kent is the gateway to Europe at the moment, with lots and lots of lorries and freight coming in from the continent to Kent, so roads are another big issue. But should we be having another vote on the final Brexit decision and on the deal itself? Well, Rosie Duffield is the only MP who is backing a people's vote.
I'm the only Kent MP who has come out and said I want a people's vote, and I've had, like I said, hundreds, if not thousands of emails encouraging me to do that, and I've been marching with my constituents recently just on that, so yes.
And of course, if we do hear anything from Prime Minister Theresa May this evening, we'll bring you right up to speed here on Kent Tonight. Now, back now to the news that royalists across Kent have been celebrating the 70th birthday of Prince Charles. Traditional gun salutes were held at Green Park and the Tower of London this afternoon, while Prince Charles and Camilla also attended a tea party in central London. But do you really care about Prince Charles's birthday, and has it been celebrated too widely? We asked shoppers in Rochester.
No, I think he should have the crown so that he can let William and his family have more family time before he takes on the responsibility.
I personally haven't got a problem with it. I think he'll be fine as a monarch. As I said earlier, the Queen is still there at 90, so yeah, I haven't got a problem.
Well, I watched his 70th birthday programme, and I warmed to him really. And yeah, I think British Constitution says he should inherit the throne when the Queen dies.
I think he should. The Queen has been around for an awful long time. She's going to be around for a little longer yet. And if the trend carries on with her parent, Queen Mother, dying at 101, he'll still get a fair shot at it, I think.
I would prefer for Prince William to be the next monarch, but I don't think that's going to happen, and I think it's going to be Charles. But that's fair enough, but I don't think Camilla should be his queen and called queen.
I think he should skip through to the next in line to the throne,
in a way,
because I think we're looking for a new monarch that will reign for hopefully as long as his grandmother would be.
Don't forget you can keep up to date on all things going on in Kent by visiting our website kmtv.co.uk. You can check out some of our latest stories from across the county, like this video about a huge fire breaking out at Folkestone's Morrison supermarket. The crackling of flames amid thick fumes of smoke. Those are the sounds and sights Folkestone residents woke up to this morning as a huge fire engulfed the Morrison supermarket on Cheriton Road. Firefighters were called shortly after 7:30 and remained at the scene late into the afternoon. Fortunately, Morrison's staff had evacuated the area before fire crews arrived and no one has been injured.
There's lots of things in the supermarket that burn quite well. So the fire moved very quickly through the Morrison supermarket to about 3/4 of the entire building. We managed to halt it at that stage and have been very successful in fighting the fire internally. That has saved at least part of the warehouse stock that Morrison's have got.
It's the pictures of total destruction, complete devastation which really tell this story. The Morrisons left in ruins in just a couple of hours. And it's not only shocked the supermarket, but also the surrounding area.
To be honest with you, I send the kids there by themselves, the older ones, to go and get sweets and things. So it's quite scary, actually, that, you know, I wonder how they would have reacted had I have not been there and they'd have been there. Yeah, so it's quite scary that something like that happens on your doorstep. You just don't expect it.
A friend phoned me to say that he thought Morrison's was on fire, and so I walked to the end of our drive and we saw all the smoke and flames bellowing from the top of Morrison's. It's our local shop, we always use it, and disappointed to see what has happened.
Oh, I'm completely shocked. Do you know what I mean? I was going in there to get a couple of drinks. Yeah, it's shocking.
Kent Fire and Rescue have confirmed the fire started in the cafe area of the supermarket. They're now working with Morrison's to ensure they've made the building as safe as possible.
Our key concern at the moment is the impact this is having on the community. As the morning's run through, there has been a lot of smoke from the incident, and so we've had a warning and form in place for members of the public to make sure that they close their windows and doors and stay in.
Surrounding schools adopted those instructions to prevent any illness for pupils in the area. But despite no injuries, the overwhelming feeling in Folkestone is one of shock and disappointment that this brutal fire has destroyed a vital local service. Keelan Webster, KMTV. So I was at the scene last week, and good news today for residents as Folkestone and Hythe District Council has confirmed a temporary store is in the pipeline and destined for the same site. Now, a councillor in Herne Bay has said that fines should be imposed to discourage you from feeding ducks with bread. He said it could kill waterfowl and attract vermin such as rats. Signs were put up in Memorial Park in the town earlier this year, but there are still fears that the dangers are being ignored. Isabel Miller has been to Herne Bay.
Feeding ducks bread may be something you've grown up doing, but giving the animals this starchy snack isn't so much a treat, but rather what is said to be slowly killing them. Signs were put up in Memorial Park in Herne Bay earlier this year to try and warn people of what they should be feeding ducks. But Councillor Andrew Cook thinks that more still needs to be done to educate people and that fines should be imposed as a last resort.
I think over a period of time it will work, but we may have to do further education on the way through. I'd hate to think of us fining people for throwing bread in a pond for ducks. It's quite difficult for the likes of you and myself to actually approach people about that. But I think if you've got an enforcement officer or a PCSO and they just happen to stroll along and mention it, then they probably will actually cease the action that they're doing and not do it again.
Now I'm here in Memorial Park in Herne Bay. In my hands are some lettuce and some duck pellets, which is what you are allowed to give them. Now, although none of the ducks want what I have to offer right now, bread is actually bad for them, yet people are still continuing to feed them with it.
But what may seem like an innocent act could actually cause a disease known as angel wing that affects how ducks fly and could eventually kill them.
Well, it's great that people want to feed the ducks in the local park, but bread to a duck is kind of like junk food. The things you can feed ducks are based around plant grains or seeds, so things like sweet corn, take it out of the tin first, peas, make sure they're not frozen, porridge oats are good, grapes cut in half so that they can swallow them easily, and rice, cooked or uncooked.
Tim from Herne Bay comes to Memorial Park almost every day and noticed the state of what is normally a beautiful place going downhill and contacted the council.
We were a bit concerned because a lot of people were throwing bread in ostensibly to feed the ducks, and the ducks had had enough, and the bread was just floating on the surface of the water. The water was getting very smelly and discoloured.
Despite waiting years for the signs, they don't seem to have fully worked. And a fine for throwing bread to ducks is extreme to most people, but in order to save ducks and our ponds, we may have to help them ditch the carbs. Isabel Miller for KMTV.
Coming up, we'll be looking ahead to our business programme Chris & Co, which is with you from 6:30 this evening. Back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Kent Tonight, live on KMTV on Wednesday the 14th of November. In case you missed it, County reacts to Crunch Cabinet meeting. Kent MPs have their say on Brexit deal.
For Canterbury, certainly it's potential disaster. We have the knock-on effects of all of the things that happen in Dover.
Ban hands-free. Mum calls for change after horror crash.
We could have died. We all could have died.
A crackdown on ducks. Councillor calls for fines to stop you feeding.
I'd hate to think of us fining people for throwing bread in a pond for ducks.
And in sport, check trade, check out. Gills bow out of the competition with a win over Crawley.
Time now for your pick of the papers with a look at what's making the news in print, online and radio across Kent. Earlier on today, I spoke to KMTV's Grace McRae, who started off by telling me about planning proposals in Medway.
So our first story was brought to us by Ed McConnell from the KM Group, and it's about a small village that have managed to get the government to reject a developer's appeal to build 225 new homes in a village in Medway. So Medway Council have already refused to allow Gladman Development to build on land off Town Road in Cliffwoods in 2017 after they applied in sort of mid-2016. The company took their case to the Secretary of State for Housing because they still plan to build, but there was a lot of protest from people around the village. There was in fact 332 people who objected in total, arguing that the plans would destroy the open countryside, ruin the village environment, and also put pressure on the village's primary school, which is already very oversubscribed. So you can only imagine if they built 225 new homes. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a bit of a problem if they did introduce that. I can see it from both sides, really. What's your second story today, please, Grace?
So our second story is about an autistic teenager from Ramsgate, and he's recently been requested to travel 20 miles into Canterbury to prove that he has autism for his disability allowance. This sort of came as a shock to him and his family, as they already had a plan set up, and it came to his 17th birthday, and then he was asked very suddenly to prove that he has autism, and it's caused them a lot of distress. Obviously his mum, as you can see in the picture there, has already been in charge of his finances because he's unable to do that, and it's just caused them a lot of unnecessary distress and anxiety in their household.
Yeah, we have seen a few of these stories where some disability is not obvious to the naked eye, and again it's reiterated itself here. Final story, please, Grace.
So our final story is a little bit more upbeat. It was brought to us by Tom Pyman from the KM Group, and it's about the Mole in Maidstone has set an opening date of next Wednesday for their new KFC. To accommodate the new restaurant, they've made the dining area undergo a sort of revamp, so there's more seating areas, and yeah, it's going to be a lot more exciting around that sort of area, and it comes after plans have emerged this week that they're going to create a new food court in the mall, and it's scheduled to start in January. So yeah, that should be exciting.
Absolutely. Grace, thanks ever so much indeed.
Thank you.
A reminder, you can watch Kent Tonight live and on catch-up at our website, kmtv.co.uk. You can stay up to date with all the news, sport and weather from right across Kent, whenever and wherever you are. You'll find breaking news, local features and repeats of our special programmes. Now to talk more about a Maidstone wonder goal, here's Cameron with the sport. Now, Cam, a really impressive goal from Jack Powell for Maidstone in their excellent FA Cup victory at the weekend as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there's that old saying, passing how difficult it is to pass a camel through the eye of a needle. Obviously, not as tricky as that, but a fairly sensational strike from Powell. We've got a replay of it here, and look how tight an angle that is. I mean, almost 180 degrees, right off the post, perfectly placed there.
And it really is a fantastic effort from there. As you say, the angle there is so tight, And as you were just telling me a moment ago, what a way to get his first goal for the Stones.
First goal since signing on from Ebbsfleet. I think any of us would be happy to have scored that in one of our KMTV staff sessions we play after work. But, I mean, like I said, only his first goal in his 5th game. You can imagine his confidence is sky high after that. Speaking afterwards, he said he'd intended to hit the top corner. He doesn't normally aim so specifically for that. He kind of goes for a general area. But there he was like, he wasn't going to take any chances from his position that he plays in centre mid. He says he's got to take opportunities like that whenever he gets them, and wasn't going to pass up on that any time there. He was chuffed most about actually being able to contribute to getting the Stones back into their game and getting that well-needed victory. Obviously been quite a hard season so far, a lot of ups and downs for the Stones, losing the manager, and now since then it's been a real upturn in form, and he's hoping that this will create a bit more consistency with the squad and really bring about a huge number of changes in there in terms of performances, and hopefully a few more wins and a few more wonder strikes like that. Now, staying in football, manager Neil Cugley will roll back the years when he takes Folkestone to Woking in the FA Trophy 20 years on from their memorable last visit. Invicta are off to Kingfield next weekend after being drawn away to the 3-time winners in the 3rd round of qualifying. Cugley's side gave the Cards a fright in their first meeting in the competition way back in the 98-99 season before losing an extraordinary game 8-4. Woking are 3rd in the National League South at the moment and will be favourites again in this tie, but Folkestone now play just the 1 division below them.
It's going to be overcast this evening in most parts with lows of 10 degrees in the west of the county. We can expect some sunny spells tomorrow morning with temperatures between 12 and 13. Into the afternoon and conditions will stay much the same, although temperatures may drop in Chatham. And looking forward to the next few days, it will stay quite mild and dry for the season. Highs of 14 degrees in Chatham on Friday. Coming up after the break is our business show, Chris & Co. In a minute, I'll be speaking to Chris Price about what you can expect on this evening's episode. But first, here's Christina Curtis with this week's Business Roundup.
The Chief Executive of Premier Foods, which owns the Batchelors factory in Ashford, is set to step down from his role next year. The announcement that Gavin Darby would be resigning as CEO was made when the firm released its latest financial figures, which showed losses before tax of £2.2 million for the half the year up to September. This was despite a revenue increase of 1.3% and a trading profit growth of 6.2% to £51 million. It was also announced that despite a strong performance, the firm, which produces Mr Kipling and Batchelors Copper Soup, are looking to sell off the Ambrosia custard brand. Mr Darby said, "Having announced a new strategic initiative for the business, I've decided to step down as CEO on the 31st of January 2019. Over in Herne Bay, Lidl have revealed plans to build a new store in the county, on land near Greenhill Roundabout. Bosses at the German chain previously applied to build on the land earlier this year, but it was narrowly rejected as the site is said to provide a natural green buffer between the main road and nearby homes. Now, in a fresh bid for the supermarket, which would create 40 full-time jobs, the application has been amended so the store would lie closer to the roundabout, with part of the site left undeveloped as a paddock area. The new proposal is available for public comment on Canterbury City Council's planning website until the 7th of December. And finally, another one of Kent's major wine producers say it has had a bumper harvest due to this year's summer heatwave. There have been a record quantity of grapes according to Gusbourne, which is located in Appledore, and these grapes were said to be wonderfully ripe across all 3 varieties: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. This is said to be due to superb conditions throughout the growing season and the harvest commencing earlier than ever before. The Chief Executive Officer, Charlie Holland, added that it has been an outstanding year across the English wine growing community.
And Chris joins me in the studio now. Chris, I'm going to take a guess. Brexit probably on the menu tonight.
Absolutely. I mean, it is. We are actually at a crunch point where actually something might be happening, which has so long been, you know, a problem for us journalists covering it closely. But yes, we've got Theresa May in loggerheads of her cabinet over this Brexit deal, the deal that no one appears to want to absolutely back, but equally no one appears to be able to offer any other options. So our guests tonight, Jo James from Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce and Richard Lavender, a consultant in the engineering field and also a director at the Chamber. We're going to be talking about what businesses are wanting from this deal, whether or not businesses want to see this deal go ahead, but also this uncertainty around whether or not it's actually going to get through Parliament and what damage that does to business.
And just very briefly, what is the inkling you're getting from businesses? Is it a yes or no with regards to the deal?
I think what businesses what they've said all along, we want certainty, we want to know what's going to go ahead. They certainly want access to those European markets, and that's been probably the biggest problem for the Prime Minister, being able to guarantee to businesses that they will get access to markets in Europe and the rest of the world as smoothly as possible, but equally deliver on that political element of Brexit, which is being able to be in control of our borders. And unfortunately, with that those two things don't seem to marry up when you're going to the EU. They say you can't have both of those things. We'll wait and see.
Well, very much looking forward to it, Chris. Thanks very much indeed. That's Chris & Co, which is coming up after the break. We'll be back with Kent Tonight for you at 5:30 tomorrow. See you then.
KTNA,
experts in apprenticeships, traineeships and work-based training.
Hello and welcome to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent with me, Chris Price. Joining me this week is Joe James, Chief Executive of Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce, and Ashford Health and Safety Consultant Richard Lavender. Later, we re-examine plans for a £6 billion tunnel linking Kent and Essex as people nearby plead for more time to wade through documents on its impact. First, it's the news the county's businesses have been waiting for, the details of the Brexit deal. The Cabinet is still locked up discussing the Prime Minister's proposals, and I'm glad to say our reporter Poppy Jeffrey is live for us from Downing Street. Poppy, what's the latest?
Yeah, so I'm here alongside the world's media who are all waiting with bated breath to hear a statement from the Prime Minister Theresa May on what exactly this Brexit deal will mean, but not just for the country, especially for Kent as the gateway to Europe, with lots of the trade traffic coming through the port of Dover and onto Kent's roads. So hopefully by the end of the day we'll have more details as to this Brexit deal that has been proposed and what exactly that will mean for not just the people of Kent but the business. And we'll be bringing you all of the latest.
OK, thanks very much for that, Poppy. That's Poppy Jeffrey there, our reporter at Downing Street. Now, guys, intense discussions here between the Prime Minister and her Cabinet. I mean, what will business owners be feeling about this intense standoff at the moment?
I think, to be honest, with businesses that I talk to, I think they've just had enough now. I don't think anybody expected to know whether you're sat at work on your computer, whether you're sat at home on your sofa. I don't think you ever expected to have a front row seat to spectacular infighting that we've seen either at Number 10 or we've seen in the House. And I think businesses have just had enough. I think now they just need to get on, and they need clarity, and they just need clarity so they can actually get on and plan to move forward.
What damage does this do to this spectacular infighting that Joe, you mentioned there? What damage does that do to businesses? Why is that such a problem?
Well, I think it gives it's the credit of your whole company and what you're saying. If you're going out and talking to new customers, are they actually listening to you? Do they actually want to know? And actually your staff as well. Do they feel safe, or are they doing a good job for you now and not knowing what tomorrow's going to bring? We're already 2 to 3 years ahead. Whether we come in, come out, stay or whatever, we have got to plan for the future, and we already have. Our payroll has got to come in. It's not on the it's not a government take here. We have got to earn our money, and therefore, as far as we're concerned, we're still moving ahead. Sure. And we've got to do that.
But I think also, if I look at our results for our quarterly economic survey that only came out this week, it shows that business confidence is now, it is continuing to fall now, and Brexit is now right at the top of the agenda, and businesses are holding back on investment, on employing people, and that's not good for the individual business. It's not good for the county, and it's not good for the country. So, businesses need certainty. And I think the thing we've noticed over the last few months is actually talking to our exporters. They're actually European customers and now starting to ask them the question, what are your plans for Brexit? How are we going to, in case of a no deal, how are your goods going to get to me? And obviously businesses look for the least route of resistance. So actually, our Kent exporters are talking up the situation, but actually with all the infighting that's going on, it's very difficult to talk up when our politicians are coming out with what they're doing.
Well, export perhaps is a very good time to talk about some news from earlier this week, which emerged that Ramsgate Port could receive £200 million of funding in a bid to keep trade moving when Britain leaves the EU. It's hoped an upgrade to the site will help alleviate delays at Dover, which could be created by the need for longer customs checks on lorries heading to Calais. Ramsgate Port, which is owned by Thanet District Council, has been left largely quiet since the collapse of Trans-Europa ferries in 2013, yet there are questions about how much of the traffic heading towards Dover the site would be able to take. Christina Curtis has more.
Transport Secretary Chris Grayling has announced that he is drawing up plans to expand Ramsgate Port as part of Brexit. As you can see behind me, the Port of Ramsgate is empty, and that is quite often the sight here, but it's one that local people desperately want to change.
The last ferry service we had here was Trans-Europa, which collapsed in 2013, and since then the port has been losing £2.5 million a year approximately. During that time there have been discussions with over 5 operators to see if they would be interested in running a service, and without exception they've turned it down.
There's a black hole and it's sucking ratepayers' money down it, and that's the Port of Ramsgate. It's a dead lump of concrete that is costing an obscene amount of money just to keep it sitting in readiness for nothing.
They also feel that Mr Grayling's plans may not be best suited for Ramsgate.
It warrants examination, but the reality is that Ramsgate is a very small port and it won't accommodate the large vessels that are used on the Dover routes. It's possible, at a stretch, that Ramsgate could handle about 500,000 trucks per year, but that's less than 5% of the load in Dover. So the question is, how effective is that going to be, and what economic benefit is it going to bring to Ramsgate?
Even were the port to be reconfigured to accommodate larger vessels, there's a very real difficulty because there's a very narrow single access channel which restricts actually the traffic in and out of Port Ramsgate at any time. So it's quite important that these logistics are taken into account.
Meanwhile, a spokesperson for Thanet District Council said, "We have been working on re-establishing ferry services at the Port of Ramsgate and are currently in discussions with a potential operator to establish a freight operation." The council has been keen to re-establish a ferry service since before the vote to leave the EU. This information has been shared with the government, but they have not responded on that basis. We recognise Ramsgate could play a role in supporting post-Brexit resilience by offering an alternative route for some cross-channel traffic to ensure at least some movement of goods should there be significant delays in Dover. But whatever the outcome for the port is, one thing they have all agreed on is that it certainly needs regenerating. This is Christina Curtis for KMTV.
OK, so Ramsgate Port, a viable alternative to traffic heading towards Dover?
I don't know if I would look and say whether it's viable, or more or less my biggest concern is I think the government would have to move heaven and earth and a lot of silt for it, and I still don't think it would be ready in time. So, there's one concern. Even if they started now, it wouldn't be ready in time. And then I don't think the infrastructure's there. We already know that if the M20 has any issue, and then lorries and cars start looking at other routes and they go down the M2 and the A2, and then obviously we come across the issue with Brendley Corner. And until the government start to really commit to give funding for Brendley Corner, then actually...
That being the junction at the M2
yes,
around Faversham.
Until you get the capacity there, I don't think it's going to be a viable because you haven't got the infrastructure.
But presumably we have to look at some other options. If no deal has possibly never been more of a possibility than perhaps what it is now. And is it understandable that perhaps the government are trying to look at these various... I mean, they also talked about perhaps using the Sheerness port as well for some freight traffic and lorry parking. I mean, is it understandable that the government is exploring everything?
I think that they will. They have to explore everything. However, now it's of no point. It's no point in doing it. As Joe has already said, the draft of the bigger vessels that you would have to have coming into Ramsgate to actually facilitate this would need it completely dredging out. The infrastructure is just not there getting down into Ramsgate. The lorries are now heavier as well coming through. So in the long term, there's a lot to be done. The new tunnel, yes, that will be fantastic for that part of Kent, but it's a long way off. We're looking at the moment, plucking straws out at the moment for March the 29th, and it's not going to happen on March the 29th.
Do you have confidence in the kind of plans that the government is putting forward? We've also got this potential turning the M26 into a lorry park. Do you have confidence in the ideas that are being thrown out there?
It's very frustrating, but you can't change what's happened, you know, and you know, I won't harp on too much, but it is frustrating, and I think everybody must share my frustration that we've gone all this time and here we are now that many months away, and we're scrabbling around to look for a solution, where, you know, if we'd have started that, I think it's Dominic Rabani actually said, was it this week, that he didn't understand how important,
didn't realise how big a deal Dover was.
Really? You know, that really surprised me. Well, it shouldn't really, I suppose.
It's quite strange. If you go back 10 years possibly, we sat with Paul Carter and KCC, and he mentioned then that his son had suggested that, why don't you use the M26, Dad? That was that
as a lorry park.
As a lorry park. Now, when a child starts saying that to his father, and we're all looking around for answers to it, now, 10 years later, we're going back to the M26. Should something have been done much? This is panic measures again.
It is. I mean, you know, it shouldn't be about where do we park the lorries. It should be how can we keep the lorries moving and the traffic flowing. But you know, if the 29th we have a no deal, we do have a problem in Kent, and you know, whether our government's done nothing about it, which they haven't till now, you know, we do have to look for something, and whether that be, you know, Operation Brock, M26, Manston, potentially something at Shinus. We're at that point now where we don't have that many months left, that we have to look at every opportunity that there is out there.
But very briefly, in a couple of words, what is the impact on business if there is no deal?
The impact on business, I think back to the summer of 2015.
The operation state.
And I'll leave you to know that one.
Wonderful. Guys, thanks for your thoughts on that. After the break, a plea for more time to look at plans for a tunnel between Kent and Essex. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent. Well, I'm joined by Joe James, Chief Executive of Kent Invicta Chamber of Commerce, and engineer and health and safety consultant Richard Lavender. 15,000 people have responded to a consultation on plans for a new £6 billion tunnel linking Kent and Essex. Yet people living nearby to the proposed Lower Thames crossing east of Gravesend are pleading for more time to wade through the huge number of documents released about the scheme so they can have their voices properly heard. Officials say the plans, which are the biggest for a road in England since the M25 was built around 30 years ago, will be a huge boost to the Kent and national economy. Harry Peat reports.
Whilst the traffic controllers work hard to keep the Dartford crossing moving, bosses at Highways England are halfway through their consultation plans to help relieve pressure on it with the Lower Thames crossing.
The whole of the southeast of England faces a huge constraint, which is the Dartford crossing. It regularly operates way above its actual design capacity, and it will continue to become under further pressure as housing and business grow in the area. Lower Thames crossing will provide a 90% increase in capacity across the Thames, much needed to facilitate better, more reliable journeys across the River Thames.
The tunnel could cross from North Kent to Essex, and as the consultation reaches halfway, Highways England have received 14,000 bits of feedback from you.
All the responses we're getting is hugely valuable. We're at a really critical stage in the development of our scheme in preparation to take it for planning. So we're getting a huge range of feedback all around connectivity, air quality, noise, benefits, and we're really listening, and we will use this feedback to shape our final design.
Over the water behind me is Kent. Underneath we'll run the Lower Thames crossing over to this side here in Essex. And whilst the Highways England team say that this could be a fantastic project and they've received thousands of consultation feedback forms, those against the crossing said they haven't been given enough time to fully represent themselves and get their views across. Laura Blake is part of the Thames Crossing Action Group, and whilst bosses say it's too early to say how many people are for and against the plans, many in Kent have had strong views against, but she feels even more could and should be heard.
We find that the volume and the depth of the information that Highways England are providing is extreme. It's unprecedented amounts of documentation, and that is very intimidating for members of the public and very time consuming. We would like to see it extended. If Highways England really mean what they say when they tell us that they want to hear our opinions and want our feedback, then we would welcome them to extend that time of the consultation, because at the moment it is very stressful and limiting, to the extent that we actually sadly have residents that feel that they're suicidal over this because of how much stress it is on them and their homes and their lives and their health.
Whilst many of you will be pleading for any help to solve Dartford Crossing's traffic, others whose lives may be affected by a new crossing are pleading to be heard too. Harry Peat for KMTV in Dartford.
OK, so should Highways England, first of all, allow more time for residents to take a look at this consultation and get their responses in?
Personally, I think sufficient time is there for the consultation. I get what they're saying around the sheer volume of documents on this consultation, and I think from Highways England perspective, I think that was done on purpose, sort of leaving no stone unturned. You know, every question, everything you're going to want to know is available there online for the documents to read. So no, I think the documents are there. I think there is sufficient time for consultation. There has been consultation meetings where people have had the opportunity face to face to ask specific questions. So from my point of view, I don't think it should be extended.
And, I mean, we've had people from France, the Orkney Islands, Belfast commenting on this concept. 15,000 responses so far, and we're halfway through. I mean, why is there this wide-ranging interest, first of all?
This is not just a Kent project. It's happening here in Kent, but it's the gateway. That is going to be the gateway to if you like, the powerhouse of the north. And when you talk of the powerhouse of the north, that means onto Ireland as well, to Fishguard and all the other places. France, they still need their traffic moving forward as well. So again, you don't want it stored anywhere. And this has been a long time coming. We can't carry on at the moment with the Dartford crossing. So as far as the report's concerned, yes, it has been out there for a long time. I think that Highways England have moved an awful lot towards accommodating the locals as well, the local people, and objections. So yeah, I don't see that you need that much more time. The documents are there to read.
Is it understandable, though, that some people may say, well, I live in Kent, I have my views on this, my views should perhaps count more than the views of someone from France or the Orkney Islands? I mean, is that a fair point of view to take?
I think it's... if you ever think who's going to be using the road, and as Richard's already said, it's going to be people from the places you've said. It's going to be people from Kent, people from Scotland coming down, going out to Europe. Everybody has a vested interest in a potential new Lower Thames crossing. It's vital for our economic growth for the South East, and actually I think it's vital for economic growth right across the UK that we have it. So there is a vested interest. And everyone will have different opinions, whether you're local to it or whether you're over in France.
Okay, thanks for that, guys. We have to move on there. More details on that at highwaysengland.com if you want to, .co.uk if you want to contribute to the consultation. Now, with news of a vast vineyard crop, a farewell to a food factory boss, and Lidl launching its latest plans. Here's Christina Curtis with this week's Business Roundup.
The chief executive of Premier Foods, which owns the Batchelors factory in Ashford, is set to step down from his role next year. The announcement that Gavin Darby would be resigning as CEO was made when the firm released its latest financial figures, which showed losses before tax of £2.2 million for the half the year up to September. This was despite a revenue increase of 1.3% and a trading profit growth of 6.2% to £51 million. It was also announced that despite a strong performance, the firm, which produces Mr Kipling and Batchelors Cuppa Soup, are looking to sell off the Ambrosia custard brand. Mr Darby said, "Having announced a new strategic initiative for the business, I've decided to step down as CEO on the 31st of January 2019. Over in Herne Bay, Lidl have revealed plans to build a new store in the county, on land near Greenhill Roundabout. Bosses at the German chain previously applied to build on the land earlier this year, but it was narrowly rejected as the site is said to provide a natural green buffer between the main road and nearby homes. Now, in a fresh bid for the supermarket, which would create 40 full-time jobs, the application has been amended so the store would lie closer to the roundabout, with part of the site left undeveloped as a paddock area. The new proposal is available for public comment on Canterbury City Council's planning website until the 7th of December. And finally, another one of Kent's major wine producers say it has had a bumper harvest due to this year's summer heatwave. There have been a record quantity of grapes according to Gusbourne, which is located in Appledore, and these grapes were said to be wonderfully ripe across all three varieties: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. This is said to be due to superb conditions throughout the growing season and the harvest commencing earlier than ever before. The Chief Executive Officer, Charlie Holland, added that it has been an outstanding year across the English wine growing community.
Okay, so we heard there some news about Premier Foods in Ashford and its latest slight difficulties, should we say. I mean, they've got the Batchelors Cuppa Soup factory in Ashford, a huge employer. I mean, how important is that company to the town's economy?
I think it's very important. The majority of their workforce is local workforce, so I think it is very, very important. They're a very well-established company. They've been in Ashford for many, many years, and I think it's vital for its economy.
Okay, guys, thanks for that. Now, before we go, we just have time to reveal our number of the week. And this week's number is £1.8 million. That's how much a council paid for a prominent former bingo hall, which it could turn into homes. Ashford Borough Council bought the former Mecca bingo building in the town centre, which was formerly an Odeon cinema, last year. The fate of the site is to be debated at a full council meeting in December, with a petition to turn it into a theatre gaining 3,000 signatures. Guys, the council is apparently looking at this site to potentially turn it into homes. I mean, what do you think about councils using taxpayers' money essentially to buy up property and look at it and essentially become a property developer?
Councils have got to start doing that and getting their own property portfolio together. When government subsidies stop and they're not paid anymore, how many councils can actually look around as Ashford has and be self-sustaining? And that is, I think, the point of taking it forward as a business.
So it's a change in the way that councils kind of run. It's more business focus, is it, from councils?
I think it's a very entrepreneurial approach, because actually in the long run it's the local residents that actually benefit, because the council buy these properties. So they bought, for instance, the local shopping centre, they bought a big office building in Ashford, and that gives ongoing revenue. And actually they've managed to turn what was a failing shopping centre to now an almost full shopping centre. The same with International House in Ashford. They now own that. That's almost full. So therefore the money's coming back in. So therefore council tax is remaining lower.
Okay, very quickly, I mean, should councils be looking, when they buy these properties, to turn it into housing, or should it, is it the idea of a theatre, perhaps something that should be supported? Should councils be looking at creating things for the community maybe rather than homes?
When you think you have to go to Canterbury to get to a good theatre, and do we want one in Ashford? Well, you've got to do the footfall work first. Will the people go there? Can they park there? Will there be sufficient? And that is the main thing. You can't put it up just because it's popular.
Richard, Joe, it's been wonderful having you both on the programme. Thanks so much for coming on. That's it for the latest edition even of Chris & Co, our show looking at the issues affecting business in Kent. Keep up to date at kentbusiness.co.uk, but for now, thanks for watching. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
KTNA, experts in apprenticeships, traineeships and work-based training.